that helps you minimize risks of getting your fingers burned in future. So tonight we're here to look at costly borrowing blunders, mistakes that we make that can get us into trouble in future. It doesn't matter the reason for your borrowing. It doesn't matter how brilliant that reason looks like. It doesn't matter the amount that you want to borrow. If you make the mistakes that we will be looking at tonight, you begin to set yourself for trouble ahead. As I mentioned before, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. My intention, my prayer tonight is that after this conversation, then you are in a better place to begin to know what to avoid, so that then you can also begin to set yourself for minimized trouble in the days to come if you have to find yourself borrowing. Because the truth about debt is that it is here to stay. We cannot sit here and pronounce debt dead. It is here to stay. We found it. We shall leave it here. But as we live with it, we must master how to live with it. We must master how to make it work for us. We must master how to behave ourselves around it, so that then, should we choose to get into it, then we emerge better than we were before getting into it, so that we use it as a tool of progress. We use it as a partner of progress, not a sabotage of progress. So borrowing blunders is what brings us here tonight. Welcome everyone who's joining. Please share this with your friends so that we can also keep learning together. These are conversations that for a long time, one wishes they knew or they heard about them long time ago. A lot of times I have sat down and wondered why I didn't know what I know today. For those of us that are new here, welcome, feel at home. This is that place where we just converge to talk about the realities of life, to talk about life in a manner that scares many people to talk about. But it is a safe place, because at the end of the day, after we've talked about life in that raw manner, we live with certain lessons that might make us better in the days to come. A lot of times we talk about money, and money is one. We do not want to talk about money. We avoid talking about it. It is even worse when we think about the hot subject of debt. The few people who try to talk about money, I have said many times, are those who explain its inadequacy. You've heard so many people say, hakuna pesa. Our tongues have been cultured to find it so easy to pronounce that hakuna pesa, even when we have money. And I have found a lot of with that. Sometimes I have argued that maybe that is why money avoids us. Use on money is vocabulary that negates what we wish to have. Then we are also confusing money. For a second, I challenge people to imagine that you are the person who needs to be in a relationship with this other person who keeps denying you even when you are with them. Will you be comfortable staying with such people? And so maybe we need to change our vocabulary around money. Maybe money runs from us because of the words we use around it. I'm still dreaming for that day when I will meet you on the streets and you tell me, leo kuna pesa. Well, I don't know what scares us, but for reasons known to ourselves, we keep denying presence of money around us, even when we have the money. So having said all that, thank you so much for those that have already tuned in. I can see Livingstone, Max, I can see Bernard, Kimeu, Judith, I can see Titus, I can see my sister Stella, I can see Samino, and so many others. Thank you so much for coming. And we now begin to dive deep into the conversation of tonight. Costly borrowing blunders. I took a moment to look at how people behave around debt, how people conduct themselves around debt. And the big question was, what is it that makes people begin to look at debt like this big monster? I remember last week I was invited in another webinar, and we began by the person doing the introduction was defining debt as a monster. And that is the view of so many people, that this thing is a monster. So what is it that makes us find ourselves in a place where we have every right to define debt as a monster? The reality is that the monster is not even debt. The monster is that animal I call the trap of debt. Now, given that blunders are one of the causes that will push us into the trap of debt, then it is only fair that we reflect about it. It's only fair that we talk about these blunders so that we know what to avoid. So I came up with a set of 3 blunders that will push you into the trap of debt. And the first set of blunders is what I call blunders before borrowing. And then we have blunders during borrowing. Then we have blunders after borrowing, right? It doesn't matter at what stage you will blunder. You could play safe in the beginning, in the middle, and still blunder after the money has been given to you. You can also blunder from the onset, from the beginning. So allow me, I hope you have your pen and paper or your mind sharp and ready for this. The first set of blunders is what I call blunders before borrowing. Now, before we walk into a lender's office, before you pick your phone to begin dialing, to begin visiting that lending app, before you reach out to your friend to give you money, to bail you out, there is a conversation that needs to happen within yourself. There is a conversation that needs to happen in your mind. You need to summon yourself to a meeting, to converse with yourself. Now, as to whether you do converse with yourself usually or not, that's a whole different conversation. But there are blunders people make before they approach the lender, before they begin to dial the buttons of their phone or to swipe the screens of their phones. And these blunders begin to get tricky. For purposes of tonight, I will mention 2 blunders within this category of blunders before borrowing. And the first blunder is failure to qualify your purpose of borrowing. The truth is that every borrowing has a purpose. As to whether the purpose is good or not is another conversation altogether. Purposes that leave you better than they found you are good purposes. Purposes that leave you worse than they found you are bad purposes. Purposes that come to steal money from you are not good purposes. Those that add money to you are good ones. So regardless of what your purpose is, you have a purpose for borrowing. You may not tell anyone, you may lie to the lender, because a lot of times, and as we shall see, when we'll be looking at purpose-driven borrowing, I will paint a picture of how we behave when we walk into a lender's office, and I will open your world to how we categorize the purposes for borrowing. And there are those people who give lenders purpose B when they know that once they get the money, they will use it for purpose A. So if you fail to qualify your purpose for borrowing, and I will also examine in detail next time we look at purpose-driven borrowing, how you qualify your purpose. But for tonight, before you walk into a lender's office, you need to qualify the reason for your borrowing. You have to be clear with yourself. Why do I need to borrow? Find an answer to that question. Now, how much do I need to borrow? Must I borrow? In other words, you're finding out whether there is an alternative to what you want to do. Must you borrow? Now, if you must, how much do you need to borrow? Ask yourself whether you need to borrow now, because there are some purposes that can actually wait, but because we do not have the patience, we want things to happen now. We fail to wonder or to ask ourselves whether the reason for our borrowing can wait until we earn our money. Remember, debt is not free money. Debt is costly. Debt comes at a cost. Even where you are being given money at 0%, there is a cost attached to debt. Every debt carries a burden element. When the book of Proverbs described the borrower as being a slave to the lender, the author knew what he was talking about. Every debt carries a burden element, whether it is good or not, whether it is paying itself or not. You will still find yourself once in a while wondering within yourself or telling someone, I am looking forward to the day when I am free from this debt or when I clear this debt. Whether you will take another debt thereafter is also another story altogether. But it's because of the burden element. So debt is not free money. Debt comes at a cost. And it is because of this cost that you have to be cautious as you get into it. Otherwise, you burn your fingers in a big way. So must you borrow now? And give yourself genuine answers to these questions. Do not lie to yourself, because a lot of times we get blinded by the need for the money that we are looking for. And the time when we are pushing for this money, we refuse to think, we refuse to listen, we refuse everything. We do not even see. Debt is not free money. So ask yourself those questions. But very important, as you qualify the purpose for your borrowing, ask yourself, what is the inspiration for my borrowing? Where am I getting this inspiration from? Who are you borrowing for? Again, if you followed what I do, you must have heard me ask the question, who do you borrow for? When I ask who do you borrow for, I do not mean who will you give money after you borrow. You know, that is the literal sense, where you borrow money and give it to another person. If they had promised to help you in repaying, if they disappear with the money, you will pay a loan. You will be saying, I did not borrow for myself, I borrowed for this other person. But I'm talking about a bigger thing than just literally taking money and giving to a different person. I am asking, where did you get the inspiration to borrow? Did you borrow for yourself or for a different person? Let me explain. If we work together in an office and you see me with a nice phone, and you get inspired to get a similar phone for comparison's sake or for competition's sake. You want to get a similar phone or a better phone, but you don't have the money. So you choose to borrow. In my world, I say you are not borrowing for yourself. You're borrowing for me. And this is how you tell that you are borrowing for me. If tomorrow after you buy the phone, you come to the office and you find me with a better phone than the one you are competing with, you feel frustrated. So the phone you were buying was not yours. You bought it for the person who you are trying to compete with. Good debt is debt that is original. Debt whose inspiration is tailor-made for you. So I must be quick to add that I am not meaning that you stop getting inspired by others. It is good to get inspired, but I'm saying you do not visit your friend and find them in their newly constructed house and tomorrow you visit your bank for a mortgage. It is good to look at that beautiful house. It is good to feel the push to also own yours in future, but you must always remember to customize inspiration to suit your financial reality. Because what many of us do is once we have seen someone with something that is interesting, we want to get the same thing overnight. We do not know their story. We don't know where they got it from. It could be your colleague, but you understand nothing about their money story. Remember, financial stories are personal stories. So you begin to try and compete with them, then you realize you begin to burn fingers, and they're not burning fingers. It's because you're competing with someone who didn't know you're even competing, someone whose story you knew nothing about. So the borrowing that you want to do next, where is the inspiration coming from? Is it original? Is it tailor-made to suit your financial reality? Are you borrowing for others or borrowing for yourself? It's a crucial question that we must ask ourselves. So that is blunder one under blunders before borrowing. The second blunder under this And before we make this second blunder, if you are new to this channel, please take a second to just press the subscription button so that you do not miss out when when I post a new video. There is a set of videos that I post every other week, the By the Way series and many other videos that you will find helpful. The By the Way series are videos that I create to give you that by the way moment, for you to just listen in and say, by the way, I never thought about it this way. By the way, I need to take action in this direction. So if you are new here, please take a second to just subscribe, so that then you also become part of this family and you also support this cause. So I'm giving a couple of seconds, then we move to the second blunder under the first category. In the meantime, I've seen Joyce, I've seen Ivy, I've seen Esther. Karibu sana. All right, so we progress. The second blunder under this first category is failure to consider the impact of the proposed borrowing on your budget. Now, this one, very few people consider. Very few people think about where the new debt will leave them. Now, this is what I mean when I say you need to consider the impact of the proposed borrowing. You have been earning, say, 50,000 bob every month, but you've been spending coin to coin. That means you rarely save. The 50K is just enough to carry you from end month to end month. Now, when I say 50K, if yours is below 50, don't think this cannot affect you. If yours is above 50, don't think this can affect you. Put your figure and substitute it with the 50K I'm mentioning here. So you've been carrying yourself through the month using your income coin to coin, rarely saving. So today you've been told that you can qualify for a loan. Suddenly you want maybe to furnish your house, or whatever reason, however beautiful the reason is, however good the reason sounds. Today you've decided you want to take up a loan that is being repaid at 10,000 per month. It is crucial you ask yourself, and very few people ask this question: what was the 10,000 that I will use to pay this debt doing in my budget before I take this debt? You know, many people at the point of taking debt looks like free money. It's like a gift. So many people are carried away by the emotions, the excitement of getting some huge amount of money. In the process of borrowing, very few people remember that they are getting themselves into debt. And so they will do it so hurriedly. Very many people remember it was debt they got themselves into when the first installment is deducted. That's when reality sinks, that this was not free money, that this was debt. So many people will rush into borrowing, take that loan that is deducted at 10,000 per month. Then when deductions are loaded, 10,000 is gone. You've been using the 50K coin to coin. Now you have 40,000. That means your monthly budget has been pegged at 50,000. Now you have a real income of 40,000. So how do you run the month? That is the time many people realize that the 10,000 they've committed to debt payment is what they used to use for rent payment. So after you have arranged your spending, you realize that the landlord's money is falling short of 10,000. So what do you do? And this is why it is a blunder. This is why it is dangerous. What you do is that the landlord is knocking at the door, so there's pressure piling. You must do something to sort the landlord. You are 10K short. That means you have to look for borrowing to sort the landlord. Now, if you've borrowed from mainstream lending, that means you've exhausted your borrowing limit probably. You will therefore look for money from the black market, from the other world, from the Shylock world, from the mobile apps world. And that other world is a costly world. It's an expensive world. That's how you begin to set yourself for trouble. I hope we are saying something. So it's important that as you consider finding yourself into debt, remember to ask yourself, this amount that I want to commit for repayment, what has it been doing in my budget? When you ask yourself that question, you will find yourself quickly asking a second question: how will I survive when these deductions begin to happen? Then you must get an answer to that question. Your answer to the question could be that I will shake up my budget, reduce my expenditure on these items so that I am able to continue living normally. Your answer to the question could be that I do not need to borrow now. Let me wait until I have a salary increment. Then I can use the additional amount to repay this particular facility if I must take up loan for this facility. The answer to that question could be that I do not have to borrow now. I can actually begin to see if I can save and then acquire this thing much later. No matter how your answer will look like, you must give yourself a genuine answer to that question. Failure to which, the day of deductions, you also find yourself beginning to go the direction of firefighting, where you have just suddenly discovered that it was a loan you took, the 10K was doing a very important job in your budget, now it's gone, and the important job needs to be accomplished. And therefore, you have to start borrowing from some dangerous sources. It's a serious blunder. So that is blunder A, blunders before borrowing. So now I move to the second set of blunders, and these are blunders during borrowing. So let us assume that you have looked at your reason for borrowing, you have ticked every box, you've checked that this reason is good, I need to borrow now, and you know the amount you need to borrow, and you've actually decided to go ahead with the decision to borrow. There are also blunders that you can make in the process of borrowing. In the process of interacting with your lender, there are blunders that you can make that will also burn your fingers in the days to come. And tonight I'll just mention a few of them. There are also so many of them. Just mention a few of them so that then you can begin to see those things that set us up for trouble. The things that we just do or ignore, we commit or omit, and they burn our fingers. The first blunder under this category is failure to compare lenders before you take up debt. As I mentioned earlier, for many people, our eyes are focused on the money. We have identified that we have a problem that needs 50,000. We will do anything to get 50,000. We will remember it was debt. After we have gotten the 50,000, done whatever we needed to do, and the lender is calling for repayment. And that is why we have Shylocks in this town, you've heard me mention, that are giving money at 100% per week. And people are flocking those places. At some point, I remember one of them telling me that they are worried that they will not be able to meet demand. 100% per week. That means if they gave you 10,000 on Monday, next Monday, they want 20,000. Now, many people, after they leave those places, when I ask how much do you owe people, they will tell me 10,000. But truth is, after you've been given 10,000 at 100% per week, you no longer owe people 10,000. You owe people 20,000. Now, many people, therefore, forget to compare lenders. You're supposed to check with a couple of lenders. Find out the terms of lender one, the terms of lender two, and their conditions, and go for a lender that makes you more comfortable. Go for a lender that answers to your needs. Go for a lender that you feel at home with. Don't just chase money. Don't just get yourself dealing with a lender whose terms and conditions you're not comfortable with, and you live by hope and say something will happen, a miracle will happen, God will deal, and we will pay this debt in one way or the other. You'll be so shocked that when pressure begins to pile, that reality will be a tough reality to handle. You must ask yourself whether you are comfortable with the way the lender handles default, for instance. You have to ask your lender how they will behave in case you are not able to pay on the appointed day. You know, there are some lenders, if you delay paying them by 1 hour, they raid your premises. I remember, true story. Sometimes we see this in the news and we think it's out of this world, where lenders come and pluck iron sheets from your roof. So you must ask yourself, how does this lender behave in case my money delays for a minute? Is this lender the kind of lender who will come and pluck iron sheets from my roof? Am I comfortable with that? Is this a lender that is approachable? Is this a lender that you can negotiate with? Is this a lender that can allow you to clear your debt in advance, just in case you get some huge amounts? Is this a lender that can allow you to clear way before time, to make bullet payments? Or is it a lender that will penalize you for making bullet payments? You must ask yourself these questions as you compare the lenders, and then pick a lender that answers to your needs. You can also use cost to compare them. And that leads us to the second blunder in this bracket, and that is failure to consider the cost of borrowing. As I've mentioned, debt is not free money, will never be free money. It comes at a cost, always. Now, for structured debts, the leading cost is interest. Very few people consider the interest they're going to pay on their debts. As I've mentioned, all they need is money. But we must take time to look at the cost element, because it is the cost element that begins to weaken your financial muscle. I like saying that cheap is expensive, except debt. Anything else that is cheap is likely to be expensive in the long run. It is only debt that I give license to be cheap. And that's why I like saying that if you must borrow, then go for the cheapest. Why would you borrow under the same circumstances an amount at 30% when there is also another lender ready to give you the same amount of money under the same conditions at 15%? Unless you feel sufficiently philanthropic to just dish out money. Now, here's the difference. Someone giving you 100,000 at 10% and another one giving you 100,000 at 20%. At the end of the day, the 20% guy wants 20,000 on top of the 100,000. The other guy wants 10,000 on top of the 100,000. Your income is your pot. One of these guys is coming to dent your pot by 20,000. Another one is coming to dent your pot by 10,000. Why would you, with all logic, go for the guy of 20% if their other conditions are the same? Cheap is expensive except debt. Always go for the cheapest as much as it is practically possible. Yes, we must consider the cost of borrowing. It is that cost that eats into our money. It is that cost that begins to make the situation difficult for us. It is that cost that makes someone who is borrowing for a very good reason find themselves in trouble. I have encountered someone who had borrowed to complete payment for a piece of land that he had acquired. You know, in the average standards, acquiring a piece of land sounds like a very beautiful idea. In fact, this person, in the context of the world we live in today, will have a big voice when people are discussing matters of national importance. He has a voice to say, I acquired a piece of land in place X. But this is what happened. You know the way land is advertised, and they always create a feeling in us that we are actually being left behind. and the plots are already 30% or whatever, 60% sold, that is the first day they're putting up the the banner, the poster, and 60% is already sold. So you want to feel like you're being left behind. And there is this announcement of a highway coming to pass by, and there is this other university coming to set up base, and there is this promise that this land will have tripled in value after 1 year or 2 years. So my guy here got carried away by those words. He had some savings. This is someone who was living a good financial life. So someone who used to save every other day, someone who was focused. So he found a good deal acquiring a piece of land. He drew all his savings, paid the deposit. It was actually more than the deposit they needed, but there was a difference of 100,000 shillings, and time was running out. In a bid to firefight and safeguard the newly acquired plot or complete the acquisition process, he was short of borrowing options, and he found himself borrowing from a Shylock at 20% per month. You see, someone tells you, or rather something tells you at that point that some miracle will happen, and this is going to be a one-off payment. That time you forget that you only have one salary that is not even enough to pay 120,000 in 1 month. But during that time, you are carried away by the fact that you are acquiring a piece of land, which is a beautiful idea in the eyes of the majority. What he didn't know is that he was setting himself up for trouble. And that is how his challenges financially began. By the time we met, and this is a story we've shared in so many places, because he's allowed me to use his example to just shed light on this whole conversation. By the time we met, because 30 days ended and the lender wants their money, that's the time he realizes that he needs to pay using his salary. The salary is so little it cannot pay the whole amount. So the guy begs the lender to allow him to pay interest alone. That is 20,000 gone, month 1. Month 2, when 20,000 goes, he realizes that his remaining amount cannot carry him from end month to end month. So he has to go for another debt to bridge between end month to the next end month. So 20,000 is gone, but his 100,000 debt still solid. He goes to borrow another 20,000 from another place that is costly to perhaps pay the landlord and perhaps buy food for his family. Month 2 comes, and you and I know how fast time moves when you have borrowed. You've heard me say that if you ever want your calendar to move fast, just get into reckless debt. You'll be so shocked how time flies. So pay dates started coming fast and furious, fast and furious. So 20,000, 20,000, every time he has to borrow from a different place. And the other different place you borrow 20,000 at 10% or 20%, you're paying back 22, 24,000. Like that, like that. Before he knew it, trouble had set in. All his income was not even sufficient to pay the interest requirement of the money he was borrowing. By the time we met, his borrowing portfolio had hit 2 million shillings. And in my debt trainings, I have a formula I used to demonstrate to you that you can actually be indebted to people to tunes of millions when you've never touched a million, when you've never seen a million with your eyes. My guy started with 100,000, but his debt situation had gone worse by the day, that over time he was owing people 2 million. He had struggled selling that piece of land. Remember, there was a promise that in the next 1 year, this value of this land will have tripled. My guy tried to sell that piece of land. The offers he was getting were ridiculous. Now, let's even assume he got the buyer for the land. The trouble is, the market value of the land at the time of our conversation was lower than what his debt position was looking like. A decision that was so good, a person that was handling money beautifully well, a person that was so focused. Now trapped in debt, his economic system is on the verge of collapse because of a blunder that he made. If this will not speak to you, I don't know what will. That's why I started by saying it doesn't matter the reason of your borrowing. We have to learn to avoid blunders. We must check the cost of borrowing. A few years back, CBK decided that every bank should give the lenders, rather the borrowers, chance to see the total cost of borrowing. They introduced the TCC, the total cost of borrowing, as an extra form when you are applying your loan. But what do? We rarely go through the total cost of borrowing. We rush into signing, and the lenders have known our weakness. They give us forms when they have put excess where they want us to sign. So as we are completing the forms, our eyes are looking for where there's an X so that we can append our signatures. What are you signing? Because the total cost of credit is not just interest. The total cost of credit for a bank's scenario is largely broken into three. There is interest, there is bank charges, and then there is third-party costs for some debts. So because you had previously, before we started the conversation of doing away with interest capping, there are people who thought when interest rate is 14, it is 14. So 14 in bank one looks like 14 in bank two. You'll be so shocked that the cost of borrowing in bank one will refuse to look the same as the cost of borrowing in bank two because of the bank charges element. And some lenders were smart. The interest rate remained the same, but they played with the bank charges element. Someone gives you a loan at a negotiation fee of 1%. Another one gives you a loan at same amount, negotiation fee of 3%. The cost cannot be the same. It is close to my heart that sometimes I have to speak the way I'm speaking. So don't just take things for granted. When the bank gives you the TCC form, look at it. What are the bank charges? Are you comfortable with them? Then use that to compare with the other lender and the other lender. And at the end of the day, it shows you that at the end of the day, you will have paid us a total of this amount. Then later on, when deductions start, that's when you start crying and telling your lenders that you never knew they were charging you what they were charging. When you refer back to the contract you signed and they had actually told you that they do that. We have to be cautious. Another blunder in this category of blunders is failure to abide by your ability for borrowing. You go to a lender and they tell you that you can only qualify for 200,000 bob, but you begin arguing with them. You begin trying to make them give you a bigger amount just because your eyes were fixed on 500,000. When the lender tells you that you qualify for 200,000 and you go and try to become crafty and come up with ways that will help you get 500,000, the truth is that you're setting yourself for trouble. If you cannot afford, you cannot afford. Let's respect that. The moment you go beyond the reality that you cannot afford and you force yourself into credit, because we are human beings, we can always force our way into getting credit. But the trouble that awaits you when you are not able to repay is huge. So failure to acknowledge your ability to repay debt is a big blunder, and it will cost you big time in the days to come. Another blunder here is also failure to consider the terms of repayment. You know very well that you receive your money monthly or maybe once after 2 months, but someone gives you money and they tell you that I want my money back next week Friday. But because your eyes are looking at the money, you accept. You actually promise to give them even before Friday when you have no clue where the money will come from. Let's stop lying to ourselves. We have to be real. Conversations of money are logical conversations. So when you agree to a contract of weekly payment, you know that your money is a monthly, your cycle for income is a monthly cycle. Then there's a problem. There is a big problem. Because what happens is when the repayment day comes and the lender is expecting you to pay money and you do not have the money, pressure piles. In a bid to avoid the pressure, you will find yourself borrowing from dangerous places. And that will be a big problem in future. So we have to be cautious. We have to be keen as we go into debt. Now, the last blunder under this that I'll talk about tonight is failure to consider the turnaround time. Turnaround time is the time between the time you make an application and the time the money is disbursed to you. We also fail to consider that, and that sets us up for trouble. You have a sick person in hospital, and the doctor wants you to make a deposit before they can start treating your patient. And you pick your title deed and walk to a bank and begin processing a loan that is secured by title deed. It's a big joke. The duration it will take for the loan to be approved, for the perfection of securities to be done, for the legal charge to be marked on your property. The money will come when the problem is already beyond repair. You'll be lucky to still be having your person alive. You must learn to match the turnaround time with the need that you have. The loan might be approved, but you will get money when it's already overtaken by events. There is nothing as dangerous as money in the hands that do not have a plan for it. So you will have money, but the reason why you needed the money is already gone. Your mind will quickly develop things that look like needs for spending that money. I have said that the human minds only need 10 minutes to generate a spending plan for money. If tonight I tell you that I'm giving you 100,000, I only need to pause for 10 minutes. By the time I come back, you will tell me how you'll use it. If I balloon it to 1 million, I just need to pause for 10 minutes and you will tell me how you'll use the 1 million shillings. So when you will get money whose purpose is overtaken by event, you will definitely use the money. But you will use the money for reasons that may not be as urgent, as important as the original intention. Let me stop there for that particular category of reasons, or of blunders. So let me move to the last category of blunders. And these are blunders after borrowing. So you have successfully gone through the paperwork and you've been successful in your application, and the lender has said that we agree to give you the amount that you have borrowed. And the lender has actually disbursed the money into your account. You have received the money. There are still blunders that you can make that will also set you for trouble. Tonight, I'll talk about two. The first blunder here is diversion of borrowed funds. Now, I may not talk enough about diversion of borrowed funds, but if there's one video I will refer you to in my YouTube channel is a by the way video that I called diversion of borrowed funds. I've detailed scenarios both for individual borrowers and business borrowers of how diversion of borrowed funds can be dangerous. You see, when you divert borrowed funds, you create a man-made future emergency. You borrowed for school fees. When the money is ready, you choose to go on holiday with the money. The money is yours. It is you who will pay. That is the justification at that point. But after the holiday, schools will still reopen. School fees will still be needed. But by that time, you've exhausted your borrowing limit. You have created a man-made emergency. The way you will be running up and down looking for money for school fees, people will be looking at you and wondering where you're coming from, because you've diverted borrowed funds. It is a dangerous thing. And these things happen. I've seen them enough times. I have blundered in that way myself before. I like giving this example of this friend of mine who we gave money for school fees, 450,000. He had children in institutions of higher learning, 4 of them. So we approved a loan for him. The first day he withdrew 100,000. As he was leaving the bank, I called him and asked him what he was going to do with the money. He looked at me and told me, "Young man, this is my money. Mind your own business." I actually regretted why I poked my nose into his business. You know, from a banking perspective, once you have qualified for credit and we've given you credit, then we don't follow you up to see what happens with the money. We don't actually ask you whether you're going to spend the money as planned. The only time we try to ask is if it's a business facility. So he shut me up and I, I let him go. What he did is that he crossed the street after the bank and lodged in the hotel overlooking the bank. He made calls to his friends. He summoned them to town to come and witness how powerful he had suddenly become. And indeed, he was powerful. Akachafua meza sawa sawa. The following morning, he walked into the bank, smelling of heavy alcohol, this time round wearing those lodging slippers, you know, the blue and the red slippers. I think we are serious thieves, that the lodging guys can give us blue and red, but are not convinced that we cannot steal, and they go ahead and notch the slippers. So he came to my desk and I asked him, "I hope you paid for whoever you wanted to pay for yesterday." And he gave me a story that he called his friends, he entertained them, and when he got drunk, they pickpocketed the balance. So 100,000 gone, day one. After narrating the story, he walks back to the counter, withdraws another 100,000. As he's passing by, I also call him for strange reasons. I don't know why I don't know. But I guess I was just living in my element. So I asked him, "I hope you learned your lesson. You're going to pay." He looked at me again and reminded me, "Young man, this is my money. Mind your own business." So I minded my business. So he went again and did the same thing. And all this time, he's not going back home. So the spouse learns, gets worried. The guy is not coming back home. She knew money was coming for school fees. So she runs up and down. Then she learns that the guy is lodging in Hotel X in town. So she goes to the chief in the rural setting. The chief has a voice in some matters. So the chief writes a letter and gives a few askaris to accompany her. They raid the hotel. On the fourth day, the guy is brought to the bank. They were only able to salvage 75,000 bob. Your guess is as good as mine as to whether the children went to school, as to whether they had to sell a piece of land for the children to go to school. Whatever happened thereafter is left for our imagination. That is what happens when you divert borrowed funds. Now, diversion of borrowed funds is a dangerous thing, especially for business people. When a lender gives you money for business, they have evaluated your business. They know that if they give you this amount and you use it as you have planned, chances are high that your revenue will grow to this point. And when it grows to this point, the debt will be able to pay itself and probably leave you with some more money. So when you get money that was intended for boosting your stock, and then you use the money for another reason other than that one, you are also setting yourself for trouble. This has affected so many businesses. So many businesses have become debt trapped because they diverted borrowed funds, either part of it or the entire amount. Borrowed money must be used the way it was planned. That is not the time for you to start remembering that you did not complete your bride price payment. That is not the time for you to remember that your car needs to be fixed. Trouble is awaiting you. The last blunder under this category is failure to honor your repayment part of the bargain. The process of borrowing does not stop when you receive the money. The process of borrowing stops when you pay the last coin. Now, there are people who refuse to pay. It is different when your situation has changed. Say you've lost your job or your business has collapsed, it's a different story. But there are people who have the ability, but they refuse to pay. And you've heard people say, kukopa ni harusi, kulipa ni matanga. And I'm sure you've met people who look like they have the ability. You know, back in the day, while still serving at the bank, during the time I served in the debt collection department, I remember we used to get to some defaulters who look you in the face and tell you, do your worst. And there's nothing you will do. Yeah, do your worst. So those ones have refused to pay. How is it a blunder that will mess you up? You know, with the advent of CRB and adverse listings, you will be listed adversely. A day is going to come when you truly need help financially, but you will not be able to access. A day is going to come when you have every chance to get a certain job, and this thing messes you up. I've met people who've been messed up by it. I've met people who refused to pay when they had ability to pay. Now, business has secured a certain deal. They need money, but they cannot access money, and they lose the deal. Let's avoid these blunders because they're costly. Good people, I wish I would say more, but we do not have a lot of time. Our 1 hour is fast coming to an end. It is my sincere prayer that you have picked something that will take you to the next level. It is my sincere prayer that next time you choose to take up debt, you will do it in a wiser way, in a better way. Please make sure you subscribe if you have not subscribed, so that then we can continue learning together. Share this with your friends. I will put a copy of it on this channel so that you can come back and listen in to what you may have missed, so that you can also invite someone else to listen in, so that we keep learning together. Feel free to inbox for any other question that you might have. Those of you that have not interacted with my books, feel free to inbox for them, and especially for what we've talked about. Breaking Free from the Trap of Debt is a book that will be beneficial to you. Debt is good only if you master it is a book that will be beneficial to you. I want to wish you all the best. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back here to look at purpose-driven borrowing, where I will walk you through the steps for borrowing that will not leave you burning your fingers. That if you must borrow, I will give you the detailed step by step that you need to take yourself through, so that you do not borrow and regret later if you must borrow. Thank you so much. May God bless you so much. Until we meet again, it is bye for now.